the situation with COVID-19 obviously creates a lot of difficulties in those scenarios. So the committee has put together, led by Mike Deaton, they have come up with some really good ideas. They're going to try to do some layout tours virtually. They've got a video team set up that's going to be going to visit some of these layouts and get them all recorded. So the Peabody pilgrimage will go forward this year. It just won't be done in person and paying a personal visit to each home, but it will be made available online through our electronic medias. And hopefully it should work just fine and share with everybody a chance to go back and look at them. In an event you miss it that Saturday, it'll still be posted, hopefully, and you'll be able to go back and view it at a later time if you missed it. So it should be a great opportunity to check out the layouts, and also they're planning to do some kind of question and answer session, hopefully with the operators and host. Even though you won't necessarily be there, you'll have a form of communication with them as well to talk to them. So that should be really, really exciting. One of the things I did want to talk about tonight, that is a serious matter, I wanted to bring to everybody's attention. At this time, we have suspended our affiliation with the Boy Scout program. This was a decision by the national organization that we're part of. It's not that anything has happened in particular with our organization, but due to circumstances with the Boy Scouts right now, the national office has sent us a directive that we no longer can put on our classes or do the things we used to do with the Boy Scout Merit Badge program. And so it also includes any of the youth programs that we may have been looking at doing or wanting to possibly do. We cannot do those at this time in any kind of official capacity. Our ruling basically is that if we have young people in our organization, that is fine. If they're members or guests in our functions, they are more than welcome to come as long as they're accompanied by their parent or by a guardian at all times during any of our functions. That's really the basic rule. We encourage young people to get involved in this hobby. It's a wonderful hobby, and we want to make sure people get involved. But signs of the times, I guess, things have just changed, and it's really, really hard to do some of the things we used to do that maybe we took for granted. But society has created a lot of different challenges for us that we just can't do the same things we've always done over the years. Hopefully, we will resume our meetings back in July at our church where we normally meet at. July is a little different kind of a month. That is, we started last year doing what they call pizza and swap meet. It's not a swap meet that everybody brings their whole closet full of stuff, but it is a chance where in July we meet, and if you have about 3 or 4 items that you'd like to bring that you think somebody might be interested in, it's a chance to either swap or purchase something for somebody. So hopefully that'll be a chance to shoot. So we're planning it in July at this point, unless something changes. That's one of the things we'll be looking at, trying to still pull off this year. That is more of a social event, and that is something that the division will provide the pizzas and soft drinks, and it's a chance just to socialize. We will watch that closely and work coordination with the church, and also the guidelines set for the state with what we can or cannot do. So that's kind of where we're at as a division. Lots going on. If you weren't aware of it, if you were planning to go out to St. Louis, the national convention was canceled. It's probably a wise decision at this point. The SCR convention was canceled. That was to be in Cartersville. And then also all of our functions that were to be done in person were postponed or changed or canceled. And that's why we're doing these social media gatherings. So do it all online. So anybody have any questions or comments, you can raise your hand using the little sidebar on your computer. You can raise your hand and Perry will unmute you. And before we get started with our clinic tonight, I don't think Sally ever got her phone or microphone working. Am I right?
You are correct. She did not.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to ask before we get started? And you can also use your keyboard to type in information at the bottom. If you will wait till our presenter is done at the end, you'll be able to type in questions during his presentation, and it'll be available at the end of the clinic. But we will have everybody muted so no one can actually interrupt the presentation that Charlie will be doing tonight. Charlie and I have known each other for a long time. I'm looking forward to this tonight. He's an excellent modeler. He's an MMR. If you're new to our organization, that means he's a master model railroader. It's kind of a category that he's achieved through his accomplishments set forth by the National Model Railroad Association. There's a set of standards and things you have to accomplish to be awarded that. It's a really nice challenge. It takes years to accomplish sometimes, and Charlie accomplished it many years ago, and we're very proud of him to do. We have several master model railroaders in our group tonight attending. So if no one else has any other announcements, I'm going to turn it back over to Perry to get Charlie going.
Yeah, give me just a second and I'll get his presentation up.
Okay.
And Mr. Crawford, you're up.
Okay. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and I'm going to mute myself, Charlie.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, it's Railway Mail Service. Perry, just next. As a youngster, I was a stamp collector, and stamp collectors collected stamps in many ways, just like model railroaders model in many ways. One way to collect was cancellations from famous days. However, December 7th, 1941 was a Sunday, and post offices are closed on Sundays. So where'd this come from? Next. Perry. There we go. The answer began with a picture in a book. This is the Adirondack Division, Adirondack Mountains of upstate New York. And this one picture shows a train arriving in Tupper Lake. And the author notes there's no railroad post office, so it must have been a Sunday. So again, where does that Sunday cancellation come from? Next. Turns out December 7th, 1941, besides what we remember it for, was the 50th anniversary of the Empire State Express name train. And New York Central, for the 50th anniversary, paid a railroad post office crew to come in, work the Sunday, and cancel these special covers. And that is where it came from. Next. Postal service was something that had been attempted since the colonial era. This is the main drag in Williamsburg, Virginia. It's the nearest I could come to a colonial scene. Next. 1792, President Washington established the Post Office Department with Benjamin Franklin as the first Postmaster General. And having used to have been a stamp collector, got a few stamps on there. Next. They basically, whatever method they could have to move the mail, they used it. This is horse-drawn wagon. Next. Next. There we go. Stagecoaches. Next. Of course, we all know the famous Pony Express. Next. Packet ships, which was an innovation that they sailed on a regular schedule, and so of course mail was put on them. Next. And on canal boats. And next. Waterways, being vital to the nation's commerce, were declared public highways, so that even today for a canoeist like me, if a stream's navigable, it's public. So if I can paddle my canoe on it, it's a public thoroughfare. Next. In 1830s, 1840s, canals were more widespread than the railroads, but the railroads were coming on. I'm hoping, I'm not sure how clear you can see this. Red are the roads. The you see the black lines with the lines across them. Those are railroads. You can see the New York Central makes it to Buffalo, not to Chicago. The Pennsylvania Railroad gets to Pittsburgh, not Chicago. But the railroads were coming along, and the lines in blue, the dark ones are canals, and of course, the lighter blue are the river system of the country. Next. The first mail sent on a railroad, surprisingly, was in South Carolina. A contractor sent mail on the South Carolina Railroad. Next. As the railroads were being rapidly built in 1838, Congress declared them to be post roads, similar to the waterways. This is the Rocket, built in 1838 for the Reading. It's currently exhibited at the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia. Next. Earlier, more like really the first organization, Post Office Department, they appointed route agents. They were issued a postmark of stamped letters. They handled mail through along their route. 1810, there were about 30 of them. And these guys got a commission on every piece of mail they handled. And we'll talk about them a little later. Next. On July 30, 1864, there were 6,085 mail routes, 7,200 miles served by steamboat, 22,000 miles by railroad, 109,000 served by stage and sulky, usually supervised by the local agent, usually in a large city in the area. Next. The first mail sorted in transit went between Hannibal, Missouri to St. Joseph, Missouri in 1862. Connections were made in St. Joe with the Overland stage. Next. The Post Office Department even then specified a baggage, it was a converted baggage car, table, and a 65 pigeonhole letter case for sorting. Next. George B. Armstrong was an assistant postmaster in Chicago, and he was sent to Cairo, Illinois in 1864. He and assistants were to clear up the congestion in the Army and Navy mails. He was successful in Cairo, and he suggested what he called traveling post offices, bundling the mail en route for each post office, and those district post office agents be eliminated. They were not happy about that because they were out of a job. Anyway, Armstrong was named the first General Superintendent of the Railway Mail Service. He tested his theories out of Chicago. The Chicago Northwestern modified a car for him. And again, we have letter cases with 75 slots, 10-inch by 12-inch boxes for newspapers, windows, and oil lamps. Next. Later, standardized railroad post office cars were specified, and the railroads were paid for hauling them on their passenger routes. Next. So how efficient was it? Prior to 1862, the costs are really unbelievable. 8 cents per sheet within 40 miles, and then it ran up to 25 cents per sheet over 500 miles. In my family genealogy, we have a family letter from 1797, and it's a folded single sheet of paper, or it was folded. Anyway, in 1863, rates were based on weight, 3 cents for a half ounce up to 3,000 miles, which essentially made it a flat rate for the entire country. Next. And it lasted. In 1883, the half ounce rate was reduced to 2 cents. 1885, up to an ounce can be mailed with a 2-cent stamp. 1917, World War I going on, the rate was raised to 3 cents. In 1919, went back to 2, raised to 3 cents in 1932, went from 32 to 58. 26 years without a raise. And most railroad post office service ended in 1965. Rate was only 5 cents. I don't need to tell you what's happened to first class postal rates since then. Next. So how did it work? A local post office would send, in this case, it's southbound mail to the depot. This is 1913, of course, on the Adirondack Division. Station agent is waiting for the daily southbound local. He'll receive mail from points north and put the southbound mail onto the railroad post office car for sorting en route. Next. If a train did not stop at a station, the mail would be picked up on the run from a mail crane. This is the Ward mail bag catcher, first used in 1869, I believe that is. Next. Catching the bag, the clerk would stand in the doorway, chest up against that bar, and he'd pull down that arm. The lower arm would come up, snag the bag, and then just releasing it, it would swing back into the car. Next. The mail catcher was reversible and movable to either side of the car because a lot of locations might only have one mail catcher, and obviously it was just easier to move the catcher, the crane. I'm sorry, there might be only one crane at a depot, and the postal clerk had to know which side of the car and which way it had to be facing to pick up the mail. Next. And inbound mail was just tossed from the moving train. Del Kittendorf told me a story where the depot was right next to a river, and the railway post office crew was late in kicking out the incoming mail, and didn't kick it out till they were on the trestle over the river, and they had to get divers to go fish the mail out of the river. Next. Mail would be sorted en route by specially qualified postal clerks. You can see they're not social distancing. Next. This is Remsen, New York on the Adirondack Division. Sorry, guys. But people literally come down to the depot to pick up packages. I think Tony Kester talks about when he was a child, his father had ordered him a train set, and by Christmas Eve, it hadn't arrived, and very late that night, he gets a call from the station agent that the train set had arrived, and of course, his father hustled down and got it. But anyway, next. I wanted to do, this was the New York Central in Chicago, and when a train would pull in mail, newspapers and magazines would all be sorted for final delivery. Next. What we're talking about previously are mail cars that ran as part of standard passenger runs. In 1875, the Railway Mail Service Superintendent George S. Bangs, I think Armstrong had become the Postmaster General, proposed to Billy Vanderbilt. Billy was the Commodore's son and president of New York Central, what was called a fast mail express. It would be a 100% railroad post office train. Next. This is the first train. The idea was on a route where there'd be so much volume of mail, they would just run through, and they were able to get mail to Chicago in 1875 in 24 hours, and newspapers and other periodicals, which, for that time was pretty incredible. It was tested for 11 months, and then the railroads and the post office department haggled over rates until 1880. And then the Fast Mail Express became a supplement to the regular railroad post office. Next. Again, the early cars were improvised from wood baggage cars. They got some windows in them, and the other equipment we talked about. Next. They were improvised designs, and the wooden construction of the cars really called for some standardization. Next. 1903 came the wreck of Southern Railroad number 97. It was a 4-car Washington to Charlotte Railroad Post Office Fast Mail Express. The Railroad Post Office cars were wooden. You can see the effects. The train had toppled off that trestle in the background. Next. And 11 of 14 clerks were killed. The other 3 were seriously injured. Train crew died. And anyway, just a fine mess. Next. Immediately, they called for all steel construction and some standardization of rail cars. Next. And it took some time. This is a Milwaukee Road Railroad Post Office car. It gives the interior layout, and what this showed me is the first time I'd seen it or found out about it, that it was actually in the center on the overhead view right above the Milwaukee. You see it notes a skylight. There you go, Perry. Very good. Yeah. There was a skylight in the roof, and I didn't know they had those. And you see on the side view of it, the mail catcher on the right-hand door. The bar, I think they tossed the mail bags out on that left-hand door. Anyway, next. After 1912, you figure almost 9 years from that wreck, all the RPO cars were steel construction. They had steam heat, 32-volt electrical system, operating lights and fans, closed closet, ice water tank, flush toilet, and a wash basin. These cars were locked and isolated from the rest of the train. Next. 2 letter cases with 744 slots on both sides of the car. On the left side of the photo, you can see the what they call the dumping tray. They would dump the bags out and then sort them into the slots. Next. The car also had racks with 10 bags and 5-foot sections. This is Pennsylvania Railroad RPO, probably in the 50s or 60s. Next. To qualify, and this was they were tough requirements, and they had to be passed annually. They called a case exam. A clerk was required to slot 16 envelopes a minute with a 97% accuracy. Postal laws and regulations were just the regulations from the rule book. Space exams, 20 written questions on the space in a railroad post office car and how organized. 85% was the passing score. And anyway, the practice, the study time, and all that was on the clerk's free time. They weren't paid for that. Next. They were, however, relatively paid. These are the equivalent jobs from pay and requirements from 1928, 1968. It was a 48-hour standard work week at 28. The salary went from $24.50 to $7,700. Extra 11 days vacation, 13 sick days in 68, 10 in 28. Travel allowance was 3 times as much. Curiously, in 1928, there was a night differential, none in 68. Overtime was paid at the regular rate in 28, and in 68, you got time and a half. Next. During World War I, the railroad post office clerks were exempt from military service, not during World War II. They were drafted and put to work in Army post offices and fleet post offices. During World War II, just a side item, each railroad post office crew was issued a revolver to fight off, Nazi saboteurs or something. So anyway, I tried to find one of these post office issued revolvers, but couldn't. Next. Well, how ubiquitous was the railway mail service? In Cobb County, per the Cobb County Times, in 1920, interesting little item, a thief with a daring nerve stole a mail bag. It was found the next morning, contents intact but rifled. How they knew that, I don't know, but they were, even Marietta was served with by railroad post offices. Next. Uh, there is a railroad post office you can visit. This is Southern 1701 at the Southeastern Railroad Museum. Sadly, the mailbag catcher is not there, but you can see the brackets are still there on the car. Next. There's the letter slots. Next. And they even have some of the bags still in place. Next. And this is the larger envelope boxes. I imagine you get newspapers in there too. Next. And I really went there to see this. RPOs had a mail slot on the car for letters, which would be canceled on route. If you were at a train station and RPO was parked or a train had stopped, you could literally drop your letter in the mail slot on the railroad post office car. The Southern Museum also has the cases that the clerks would use to practice their slotting speed, and it has an assortment of the railroad post office cancellations for mail. Next. As passenger traffic declined, the railroads became more dependent on the mail subsidy. This is an aerial view of a late passenger era Adirondack Division train. That's an RS3 on the front. It's just an RPO, a combine, and a coach. And, favorite photo of mine. Next. This is the last passenger train in the Adirondack Division, April 1965. I couldn't find confirmation because, curiously, well, next slide. What's on the consist and RPO, and they were dropping RPO routes around that time, and I'm suspicious that the New York Central stopped passenger service on the Adirondack Division because the railroad post office service was stopped on the Adirondack Division also. Next. The U.S. Postal Department tried sorting mail on highway post offices. I can't imagine that went well, and it was quickly discontinued. Next. 1965, they began shedding the railroad post office routes, and mail would be sorted on the ground and sent by truck. And I always wondered why it seemed like, from what I heard in the 30s, 40s, 50s, the mail service was better. And I think it was better because it was more efficient. It was sorted while en route. Next. The final RPO run, this one hung on a while, was the New York to Washington, D.C. route, which ended in June of 77. And next. And just a shameless pitch for September, whether we're at the church or we're still virtual, I'll have a clinic on detailing railway post office cars. And I thank you. It's good to be talking to all you guys. Oh, sorry, sources. Perry, could you go back to that? Maybe. New York Central and the Adirondacks was a picture book published in 2015. I got some items out of the New York Central Historical Society Headlight magazine for 18 and 20. They're quite timely. Railway Mail Service, Clarence Wilking in 1985, U.S. Post Office Department. And Bill Parks gave me some help on the Seaboard coastline pictures that showed the mail catcher being reversible. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
All right. Way to go, Charlie. Anybody have any questions for Charlie? I don't Anybody chatting or typing in anything?
Yeah,
Dr. Mueller.
there were a couple of questions. And the first one was not a question directed at Charlie, but it was just please make sure, I think you must have missed it. Please make sure that you are making note of NMRAX events that are occurring. There's another one that occurs this weekend. Walt did mention that at the beginning, but people may have missed that. The next question came from Mike Tarrant, and it was, were the mail bags waterproof or resistant at all, or did the station agent just have to be quick and pull bags out of the rain?
I imagine they were water resistant. They were canvas bags, but I don't think the one that got thrown in the river. I'm sure that mail was soaked. I think they were meant to stand. They could be left outdoors for a time.
Okay. During World War II, I assume that there were RPO workers still left on the railroad. You said that they were issued revolvers, so not all of them were drafted to go work in FPOs and APOs.
Correct. I mean, they wouldn't have drafted older men.
Okay.
Whatever the age draft, they were not exempt, and if you were subject to the draft, you could be drafted. I imagine there would be people on there that were not subject to the draft.
Okay.
And it was one revolver for a railway post office crew.
Oh, okay. Interesting. To defend your car from saboteurs. That's funny.
Yeah.
Other questions that you would want to add into chat? Okay. Then I will
I got a few comments before we close out, Perry.
okay.
Just want to remind everybody, next month is going to be John Boast. He's going to be our clinician. He's going to be doing exercise with scratch building with styrene. So hopefully you'll join us for that and then be watching. And the one of the best things I could recommend for everybody is really just watch our website. We're trying to keep everything posted and updated there. And things are changing a little less than they were, but we're still doing a little tweaking here or there as things need to be done. So the website or Facebook are our two best media connections to try to follow and see what's going on and stuff. So if you also and are interested and not a member of the NMRA, you're welcome to get in touch with me or Sally or anybody on the board, and we'll be glad to get you a form or get you a link to send you to the national so you can get your registration taken care of and join up with the NMRA. Perry mentioned the NMRAX, which is it's a session online done through Facebook. It's free. It doesn't cost anything, and you can enjoy it. There's been some excellent clinics, excellent model railroads that you can view and see as well. So I highly encourage everybody, if you haven't been online, please check it all out. So it's got really nice information available to you. So with that, Perry, are we about done?
Yes. I'm going to just unmute the entire room if people want to kind of. I don't know what it'll be like, but we haven't done this before, so I'm going to stop recording and unmute the room for a bit, and we'll see if a free fall, whatever it is erupts. So we'll give that a blast for a moment.